Tom's here to talk about real things.
That's right.
So let's do that.
Yeah, talking about the Frankfort Flag Initiative. You already mentioned that you were at one point a freelance videographer.
More writing.
More writing.
I
okay.
did radio shows and freelance writing for ESPN Louisville. So
perfect.
As a happenstance, there was a big lead into that. I never anticipated doing that in my life, but it ended up happening that way.
Okay. Well, yeah, talk a little bit more about your experience and kind of what brought you to Frankfort before we talk about the flag.
Well, I came from Eastern Kentucky. I actually grew up in the Red River Gorge in Powell County, so that's where I spent my childhood. It's tough in Frankfort because you talk about U of L and half's going to hate you. You talk about UK and the other half's going to hate you. But that's okay. But I spent a lot of my time, because my brother and sister went to UK, I spent a lot of time in Lexington growing up.
Yeah.
And when I was getting ready to go to college, I said, I love Lexington, but I want something different. So I said, I'm going to go to U of L. I'm going to be the different one in the family. Went to U of L, met my now wife. We stayed there for 20 years. Before I get to how we got to Frankfort, I will say that the teaser to that is I had a randomly assigned freshman year roommate. Like, I didn't know anybody in Louisville. And my random assigned roommate was a pole vaulter for the track team who happened to have been a pole vaulter at Western Hills, and he's now your city planner. So Eric Cockley. Eric Cockley was my randomly assigned freshman year roommate.
It is such a small world.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's how I initially started to become familiar with Frankfort.
Yeah.
But my wife and I stayed in Louisville for 20 years, and just always, avocations are more important to me than my vocation. Like, I have a great job and it pays me, but I work at my job so that I can then go and do things outside of that job.
Yeah.
And so, are you guys familiar with Louisville City FC, the soccer team of
Yes.
Louisville?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I just started going to those games. I'm not really, like, I don't follow soccer except for maybe World Cup. That's about it. But I was like, yeah, that looks like fun. So I went to a game. I was like, well, this is kind of fun. And there's an organization called the Coopers, which actually helped get the team off the ground.
They did, yeah. And then they kind of initiated some of the design elements and
exactly.
Like the roles, and I remember that.
Just funnily enough, one of the founders that really got things going married a girl that I graduated from high school with. So again, a small world situation. So they were like, hey, come on in. And I joined that group. And then after a few months, they were like, there's an open board position. You should be on the board. And I was like, wow, sure, sounds good.
Great.
And then 6 months later, the then president, who was a retired colonel from the U.S. Army, he's like, you know what you're doing. You should be the president. And I was like, you know that I don't like soccer, right? And he's like, that's probably why you're the best president. So I ended up being president of the Coopers for 2 years. And I try to be, I am a humble, I'm usually the guy that's like, no, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm like, no, I should probably put that in my cap as a feather is the stadium, Lynn Family Stadium.
Yeah.
I played a key role in getting that constructed.
Really?
So, I'm very proud of that fact.
Hats off to you.
Yeah,
that's
I appreciate it.
Beautiful stadium.
Yeah, that was a big accomplishment, and I felt really good about bringing that to the city. But as a result, when I was done with that, I had made some friends. And they said, if you're not doing that soccer stuff anymore, I could use somebody to cover U of L women's basketball and help me cover football.
Right, yeah.
And so I was like, sounds good. So for 3 years, I was a freelance journalist for ESPN Louisville, covering U of L women's basketball, which was a very fulfilling experience, and also football. There's a gentleman named Mark Blankenbaker from Louisville, but some people around here may know him because he's a marketing rep for Liquor Barn, actually, like all of the liquor barns.
Okay.
So, nice guy, but did that. And then, as happened to many of us, COVID came, and we all got locked in the house for a little while. And my wife is an engineer for the environmental cabinet. And she had, of course, transitioned to working at home just like everybody else. Yeah. I was given the option to work at home full time. I said, yes, I would like to work at home full time.
I will take that, yes.
But then, a few years ago, the state workers got brought back into the office. And suddenly she had to commute 45 minutes a day, every day again, or every other day, rather. And both of us said, I can work at home. You have to drive to Frankfort. having become familiar with Frankfurt through my connections, we love Frankfurt already. We come here quite frequently. It's like no brainer. Let's just move to Frankfurt.
Perfect.
And as usual, once I move somewhere, I either get bored or I'm like, hey, that would be interesting,
invested,
and then
yeah.
I can't. Idle hands are not my thing. So I said, let's make a flag. So
I love that. And so what? I'm guessing you saw our current flag. Do you remember what that moment was, or where you saw it for the first time, and then kind of you got the idea to like, you know what, we kind of need a new flag.
Not to give away too much, of course, but I'm a Kentuckian. I enjoy some bourbon every now and then. So in the evening, just kind of relaxing, drinking a glass of bourbon, and I was like, I wonder if Frankfurt has a flag, because so I'll throw out this word that is the fun word, vexillology.
Yes.
So vexillology is the study of flag design. So I am not a licensed vexillologist by any standard, but I am definitely an amateur vexillologist. And I said, I wonder if Frankfurt has a flag. And there is basically the Wikipedia of flags. It's called Flags of the World. And I went to the website and I said, ooh, now the thing was, the image on the Flags of the World website was a very old, low-resolution image.
Yeah, like a thumbnail size.
Yeah.
I do remember looking it up some years ago.
Right, and it was
yeah.
because nobody had actually seen true image of the flag before. And so it gave me a visceral reaction where I said, no, I don't like that at all. But then when I saw the real flag, once I found out more about it, and I was like, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Right. Yeah.
But when we look at successful flags, when we look at things that make flags adoptable or easily adaptable to multiple uses, the North American Vexillological Association, see, even I can't say it all the time, has done a lot of studies, subjective, some subjective, but mostly objective, where they say, these are the things that make flags successful. These are the design elements that work. These are the ones that don't work. And so I said, well, our flag could use a punch-up, in other words.
And Tom, I think we have there it is.
Yes, that is the current flag. So I'll describe it very briefly. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you've got Daniel Boone. On the right, you've got a Boy Scout.
Okay.
Because, fun fact, the Boy Scouts in the United States of America were officially organized in 1910. The Boy Scouts period, Lord Baden-Powell in Great Britain, that was 1908. So in 1908, a lot of people around the United States heard about the scouting movement and started forming their own little independent groups. And Frankfurt formed definitely the first in Kentucky, possibly one of the first 3 to 5 in the United States.
Okay.
So one of the first scouting troops. So Frankfurt Troop 1 is one of the first scouting troops in the United States, period. And predates the Boy Scouts of America, who incorporated in 1910. You've got line drawings on the north and south of the old Capitol and the new Capitol. The river, as most folks who look at a map know that the river makes a slight S curve as it goes through downtown.
Yeah.
And then it has, of course, Frankfort, Kentucky, 1786, which is our founding date. On the left, within the seal, is a slightly gray star, and on the right is a blue star. And that represents the fact that during the Civil War, both the Confederacy and the Union occupied the city.
I feel like I have seen that flag, not a ton, because like we've mentioned, it's not flying in a ton of places, right? Only a couple of spots here in town, and it sits behind the city hall and inside there. I had never realized, so you just said that
Star.
the different colors of the star,
Yeah.
Right.
and the stars, and then also it seems like just from my own taste and what I'm seeing, like the bottom left and bottom right is just
Seems
a
so
lot
empty.
of empty
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
There's not a lot going on.
It's not balanced
The
out.
stars you won't notice, especially even on the ones that fly. So currently there's only 3 places
That's
in
right.
town that you can see it with your own eyeballs. One is outside of the safety center on 2nd Street, the police center. That's the only place it flies outside.
Yeah.
Indoors, as you mentioned, if you watch the city commission meetings on FPB,
Cable 10. Yep.
Cable 10, you can see it behind the city commissioners. Of course, it's not outside, so it's draped.
Yeah.
And then in the Russ Hatter Library, the Capitol Museum. Those are the only 3 places you can see it. But because of production methods, on most of the production flags, both of the stars are the same color blue as the river. So you wouldn't actually notice the original design.
Maybe that's why.
If you go to, it's like Frankfort Title 11 Chapter 11 Title 3, I think is the actual city ordinance that makes the flag. Yeah. And you can see the description in there where it tells you what everything means.
Well, if you're doing screen printing, you'd have to pay an extra whatever just for that one little gray star.
And that is one of the reasons why NAVA says you should have certain design elements in your flags, is production costs are a factor.
Interesting.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. And, you see that, and I think we all agree it could, get
could use a
spruced up.
touch-up.
But there are elements that could be used, so I'm sure that's where, when you kind of where you go from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that this is sort of a fully citizen-run committee initiative. It's not something that the city has put out there and created, right? That you just had the idea and the thought and put together a committee, and you guys are not using any kind of tax dollars, right?
That's 100% correct, and that's very important because, even I, as a person who sat down and said, "Hey, we should do a new flag," I said, there are a lot of people who are correctly going to say there are a lot more important things going on right now. And those important things they're the responsibility of all of us, but the city commission is literally, it's their job to oversee those types of things. So we don't want to burden them with saying, you need to divert resources to making a flag.
Yeah.
Now, what I've done is I've gone before the city commission and said, hey, FYI, I want to keep them aware so that nothing catches them off guard and they don't get blindsided, say, we got a new flag, nothing like that. But no, absolutely no tax dollars are being used on this. We do have costs, like printing costs, things like that. Like I got to print flyers, I got to print out templates and things like that. But very fortunately, Steve Brooks and the board of directors over at the Capitol City Museum, so they oversee a nonprofit that's also not directly affiliated with the city. It's a separate nonprofit that just helps fund the Capitol City Museum. They said, we'll adopt you as kind of our partner. And so they're our fiduciary partner. So all donations that we're taking will go through the Capitol City Museum nonprofit, and whatever money we don't use will just automatically go to the Capitol City Museum. But again, at no point are we planning on going to the city and saying, please help us with this money.
Yeah. And the Capitol City Museum, a few places would be a better partner than the folks
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
Dr. Ellie, we've had her on the show several times before, and just an awesome partner here in our town. Before we kind of step aside, we got a weather bit from Dylan Goday, but I do want to ask you who else sits on the committee.
So we have 2 high school students from Franklin County, Elizabeth Pulliam and Sophie Emberton. Natalie Goshiri works for the Education Cabinet. She has her master's in history and is an educator. Risa Yost, who does a lot of nonprofit work around town. She's an artist and art historian. Zach Smith is actually the social media coordinator for the Capitol City Museum, and he is our official quote-unquote liaison to the Capitol City Museum. Jim Seaver is he's actually the coordinator for the roadside markers you see, like the state history roadside markers. He's the coordinator for that program. He works for the Kentucky Historical Society. And then Tiffany Seppenfield is the owner of Porter's and there's not a lot Tiffany doesn't do, but she is a wonderful friend and helping out with us there. So,
and they've done good design work there at their actual Porter's business, and it's a great place. And you mentioned a couple of high school students involved as well. I think that's such a cool idea to have some kids in our community kind of get involved there too.
It's going to be their flag longer than it is my flag, so it's important that they have a chance to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we check in on weather?
I think we should. I need to know what this week looks like. We're going to come back and talk more with Tom, but yeah, let's see what Dylan Goday and Storm Team 36 have in store for us this week. Down a little bit, but a breezy go day on Wednesday, it looks like. But yeah, there's a little tick down on the temperatures, but still spring-like. We're good. We're good. Zach, yeah, let's talk more flags. How about that?
Yeah. We we talked about the fact that our current flag isn't flying in a ton of places, and so I think people would probably be maybe forgiven if they don't know that Frankfort currently has a flag, but there's some guidance, right? Some guidelines that people like to put out there and remind folks about what makes good flag design,
what makes a good flag good?
Yeah. So why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. One of the key things to think about at any point is, what is a flag supposed to be?
Yes.
Like, what is a flag for? Somewhere along the lines, we as a society decided that flags and logos had more in common than they should. We think of it as an image that you can put on a wall or put on a web page and things like that. And that's a natural consequence of the advancement of our society. But when you think about what is a flag supposed to be, it is a piece of fabric that flaps in the wind that you can see from great distances, and you can also recognize it. So think way back thousands of years, what were flags used for? I'm on one side of the battlefield and the other guy's on the other side of the battlefield. I need to look up from wherever I am on that battlefield amid smoke, dust, I don't know what, and say, that's where I'm supposed to go and that's where I'm not supposed to go. And so obviously being able to recognize a flag from a great distance is a key. So think of the American flag. The entire national anthem is based on the fact that Francis Scott Key could look out of a porthole in a ship in the harbor and say, I can still see that is the American flag flying over Fort McHenry, and that is definitely the American flag. So that's the idea behind a flag. So when you have a flag that has tiny little details or small line drawings or itty-bitty stars that may be slightly different colors,
Just
differentiated.
then as you get farther and farther away, you're going to start squinting and being like, well, what is that? I think it kind of looks like that. Or is that supposed to be? And that just doesn't make for a great flag. And it makes it for a flag that a lot of people are like, well, why would I fly that from a flagpole? Because I'm not going to be able to see that, right? And so...
And maybe that's why our current flag is only flying in a couple
perhaps over the past 65 years, a lot of folks have said, well, sure, we got a flag, but it looks good behind the city commission, and that's all we need, right? People like me say, no, a flag deserves to be flown from a flagpole. That is what flags are for. And I want to see it on a flagpole all around town, right? And so the other aspect of that, though, is you're supposed to be able to tell flags apart. So if you have a flag that looks a lot like other flags, then you're also defeating the purpose. And so in the vexillology community, it's called seal on a bed sheet. So take a white sheet and slap the city seal on it, and you're done. And no, because every other city has done that. And so now your flag looks like every other city's flag.
Yeah, and I'm picturing in my head right now what the city of Frankfort seal is like, and it's government. It serves its purpose, right? You know what it is, but I just couldn't imagine it sitting on a white bed sheet or something and just popping it on a flag. So let's talk about using some of those design elements. You're encouraging folks to make submissions.
Absolutely, that's the key. And a lot of people, I will say this is anecdotal, of course. Most of the people I talk to, even many who have lived here their whole life, say, I didn't even know we had a flag. And that's, I consider that a point in my favor. I'm like, if you didn't know we had a flag, then functionally we don't have a flag, right? Let's actually get a flag. And then they say, well, what's it going to look like? And I'm a snarky kind of guy, so I'm like, I have no idea. And the thing is, I'm telling the truth. It's like, I have no idea what the new flag is going to look like, because it would be wrong for one person or even 7 people to decide what everybody else's flag is going to look like. So we're taking public submissions through May 4th. It's running right now. You can go to the website, frankfortflag.org. It's very obvious how to do so. There's instructions, templates, guidance, things along those lines. But the people of Frankfort get to decide what the next flag of Frankfort looks like. Now, I will say that this is the year 2024, and it's the internet, and there can be a lot of things that go wrong when you have public competitions.
Yeah.
And as such, that's why we have the 7-person committee. So I'm the chairperson. I'm not a voting member. I'm just kind of like, the guidance, the leader, trying to do things like this, get the word out, freeing them, those very wonderful 7 people, to be the curators is probably the right word. So they're going to take all those designs, judge them based on good flag design standards, and they'll eventually get it down to smaller and smaller numbers until they say, that's the one, and that's the one we'll take to the city commission.
So let me throw a curveball at you. Question. Let's say an 8-year-old submits a design, and it's all the bones are there. Like, we love where he went with this. The execution is off. Like, it's not a finished product, but we really like the bones of, like, the idea here. Then kind of where do you go from there?
And some people may not like this, but it's absolutely necessary. When you have a city flag or a state flag or a national flag, that flag belongs to the people. And as something that belongs to the people, that means that once you submit something to my design initiative, it now belongs to everybody and nobody at the same time. So I encourage every 8-year-old, every kindergartner, I don't care what age you are, how you identify, anything along those lines. Please submit flag designs, because when you crowdsource, the more ideas you get, the better you get. So once we receive those designs, just as you said, if we look at it and we're like, the concept is there, but it was drawn in crayon by an 8-year-old.
Right.
Well, that no longer matters, because I have the right to take that and basically run it through a punch-up and say, I'm just going to take this element right here, tweak it a little bit. I'm maybe going to rotate that this way. I'm going to make that wider. I have the right to do those things. Now, the core of that flag still is there, so I still get to say that, Sally, age 8, who goes to Collins Lane or whatever, that's still her flag. It's just that Tom worked with the national organization, who are professionals, and they can say, hey, if you tweak that or change that, then you're good to go.
So there will be a little bit of limits to the latitude that the committee takes. So they're not going to take Sally 8-year-olds and Jim the 40-year-olds, and I like this from him and I like this from her, and we're gonna, or maybe is that on the table?
That's on the table.
Okay.
Because we don't want to rule anything out.
Okay.
Because somebody may have a flag that has one simple design on it, and we're like, that just doesn't tell the totality of the history of Frankfort or explain Frankfort. But this other flag has something that is a really great addition to that. And we're absolutely free to do those things. That's the purpose of the committee. And so that's the key to understand, is just as I have said, it shouldn't be me designing the flag of Frankfort. It doesn't necessarily have to be one individual. It's a community effort.
So I would say that if there's anybody out there that's thinking about submitting to this, then with that in mind, don't be precious about it. Don't be like, my design has to win, and leave it alone.
You changed it.
Right,
And then also, but don't get discouraged.
Right, exactly.
Because, maybe you're worried that it needs to fit these certain dimensions for sure and fit on this thing, because you all will massage it, and like you said, you're there to help with the actual guidelines and what is needed.
And if you submit, you're a part of the process. Whether
absolutely.
even if none of your thing gets incorporated, you're informing this decision process by the committee. They're seeing it. They're like, it just kind of gets all incorporated in some way, somehow, in the final product. You will be a part of it because you were part of this process and the thought process of boiling it down.
And we're going to work with the individuals who do submit, and it's not like we're going to toss it into a box and be like, I changed it, you can't do anything about that. It'll be my job to reach out to the person and say, hey, you did a wonderful job, but if we change this and change this, and for them, it's actually a benefit because I'm reaching out to them and helping them cheat, essentially. It's like, if you change this and this, then you're going to have a better chance of your flag being the one that gets picked. But at the end of the day, yes, I don't want anyone to feel like it has to be their flag because at the end of the day, it's going to be our flag, and that's the most important thing.
Just feel like Frankfort needs to win more than I need to win.
That's exactly right.
And so folks can do submissions. They can put those online at frankfortflag.org, but also they can mail them, right, to the Capital City Museum?
There was a key study in Minneapolis. They tried to do this exact same thing, and they got all the way to the city commission stage, and the city commission shot them down because they said all you did was do online submissions. Now, it is the year 2024, but not everybody is fortunate enough to have access or graphic design software.
The 8-year-old who designed something on a piece of scratch paper at school or something. They can mail that in, or you guys will have drop boxes too.
There's going to be drop boxes, which I'm in the process of dropping off. Currently, there are drop boxes at Paul Sawyer Library and at the Capital City Museum. You can download a template. You can mail it to the Capital City Museum. So Frankfort Flag Initiative, care of Capital City Museum at 325 Ann Street. And then, as you said, I'll be putting out more drop boxes. The high schools will have drop boxes for the students there. If the middle schools and elementary schools are interested, I can, of course, get in touch with them. I'm working with the school systems. But Yes Arts, I'm going to drop one off at Yes Arts today. So places like that, just keep your eyes peeled, basically, and we'll try to get more drop boxes around town.
Yeah, and I've seen a few signs kind of around town with the QR code, I think, that takes you to frankfortflag.org. But Tom, thanks for hanging out, man. So much of what you were saying about your own background, your experience, I'm like, that's a sidebar. So we need to have you back here before too long. Absolutely.
Yeah. Zach's ears were perking up over there as soon as the Coopers got brought up. Like,
U
what?
of L, Louisville City FC, and I was like, oh, I know Eric Copley. There's so much.
I don't like being bored.
A lot of pots, a lot of plate spinning. Yeah, thanks so much for hanging out with us and giving us all that great information about the Flag Initiative. And we'll definitely have you back.
Yeah, I hope to come back, especially to give folks tips and tricks about submitting.
Oh, absolutely.
Good deal.